Are you my daddy? 4 words. A child's voice. So small it barely carries through the phone. 4 words that destroyed a man's entire life. Ryan Kessler had everything. $40 million on a table in front of him. A company worth $500 million. 15 years of climbing to the top. 0 distractions. 0 weaknesses. Until that phone call. On the screen, a child. 6 years old. Asking if he was her father. Her eyes were his eyes. The eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. Eyes he'd never seen on another human being. His heart stopped. In the background, a woman's voice, panicked, reaching for the phone. "Sophie, no, put it down." The call cut out. Dead silence. And in that silence, Ryan understood something that would change everything. He had a daughter, and someone had kept her from him. And if he didn't find out why in the next 30 minutes, he might never see her again. Don't click away. What happens next is why the story matters. Ryan left the conference room without signing the papers, without closing the $40 million deal. The venture capitalist stared at him like he was insane. His business partner James called after him, confused, but Ryan didn't hear it. He tried calling back. No answer. Untraceable number. He searched for information about the call but found nothing. That night, in his penthouse apartment overlooking Boston, he let himself remember. Her name was Isabella Chen. They dated years ago. Burned bright, fell hard, then it ended suddenly. Victoria had told him things, disturbing things. He'd believed her because he'd wanted to believe her. After that, Isabella had disappeared from his life. Now she had his daughter. By dawn, Ryan had hired a private investigator. By noon, David Brooks had an address. Portland, Oregon. A woman named Isabella using her maiden name. A daughter named Sophie, 6 years old. No father listed on the birth certificate. But when Ryan pulled the court records for the restraining order Victoria had mentioned all those years ago, the order that had supposedly justified his silence, he found something that made his blood run cold. There was no restraining order. There was no record. There was no case number. There was no order anywhere in any system. Someone had forged it. Ryan's attorney Elena confirmed it. The restraining order was forged. And Elena discovered something worse. Victoria had created multiple false orders. The courthouse had access logs showing when the fake documents were created, the exact same week Ryan disappeared overseas. But more than that, Victoria wasn't just retaliating against one person. There were 3 other cases. 3 other people's lives disrupted by forged documents created by a woman scorned. Here's what's important about what you just learned. This isn't just a story about a man finding his daughter. This is a story about what we believe without questioning it. Ryan believed a lie for 6 years because it came from someone he trusted. And that lie cost him everything. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why trust is dangerous and why it's worth the risk anyway. But first, you need to see what Isabella has been through, because that's where this story gets real. That night, Ryan called Isabella. The phone rang once, twice. She answered like she was answering a death sentence. "Hello?" Her voice was trembling. "Isabella," Ryan said. "It's Ryan." The silence lasted forever. Then she asked, "You're calling to enforce it, aren't you? The restraining order." "What restraining order?" Ryan asked. Silence. Then Isabella cried, not delicately, not quietly. She cried like someone carrying 5 years of terror had suddenly been allowed to put it down. "I've been running," she whispered, "every single day. I thought you'd filed it. I thought you didn't want to know about her. I thought I was protecting her from you. I didn't file anything," Ryan said quietly. "Someone forged it. Someone created that document to keep us apart. And I'm going to find out who. But Isabella, there's something you need to know first. If someone forged a document 6 years ago to separate us, what are they willing to do now that they know I've found you?" Isabella told him everything. The pregnancy she discovered alone, the premature birth of Sophie, the NICU bills, the predatory loan she'd taken at desperation's edge. The moment the forged letter arrived, official, perfect, terrifying. The decision to disappear. 6 years of working double shifts. 6 years of teaching her daughter to be quiet, to not cause trouble, to not ask about her father too loudly or too often. "She's been asking for you every single day," Isabella said. "I never knew what to tell her. Every morning she'd ask if today was the day you'd come. And every night I'd put her to bed and listen to her cry for someone she couldn't even remember, a father she never had the chance to know." Ryan felt something break inside his chest. A daughter asking for him every single day. A daughter waiting for him while he was building an empire, completely unaware that his entire world was missing. "What if I came?" Ryan asked. "To Portland, to meet her. Would that be okay?" Isabella didn't answer immediately. Then she said, I'm terrified. What if you leave again? What if you decide we're too much trouble? What if? I won't leave, Ryan said. I didn't know about her for 6 years. I'm not losing another minute. But as Ryan booked his flight to Portland, something else was happening in Boston. Victoria Marks had discovered the investigation. She'd seen the subpoenas. She'd realized everything was about to unravel, and she made a desperate choice. She called Frank Sutton, a courthouse security guard with connections to people who operated in the shadows. She offered him money. She offered him leverage. She offered him a simple job. Intimidate Isabella back into silence. Make her understand that cooperating with the investigation would destroy her daughter's life. Ryan drove to Portland the next evening. 16 hours with nothing but the road and his thoughts and the growing weight of 6 years he'd never get back. He wasn't thinking about the company. He wasn't thinking about the deal he'd walked away from. He was thinking about a girl with his eyes asking if he was her daddy. The apartment building was small and quiet. Isabella had texted him to come after Sophie's bedtime. She said she needed to prepare. Sophie didn't know he was coming. When Ryan knocked on that door and Isabella opened it, he saw her face for the first time in 6 years, and he understood that some moments rewire you at a cellular level. She looked at him like she was seeing a ghost. She looked at him like she'd stopped believing he was real years ago, and suddenly, impossibly, there he was. Hi, he said. And then he didn't know what to say. How do you say sorry for 6 years? Isabella stepped aside without speaking. The apartment was small, but it was filled with love. There were drawings everywhere, trees and flowers and rainbows, stick figures with exaggerated smiles, and on the refrigerator a series of pictures, a tall figure, a shorter figure, a child, the same family, drawn over and over in different configurations, but always, always 3 people together. She drew those before she found you, Isabella said quietly. She didn't know what you looked like. She couldn't remember you. She was too young, but she knew there was supposed to be someone. She drew the absence, Ryan. For 6 years, she drew pictures of the missing piece. From down the hall, a small voice called out, Mommy, is someone there? Isabella looked at Ryan. Permission. A choice. A moment where she was deciding whether to let him into Sophie's life or protect her daughter from another inevitable abandonment. Come here, baby, Isabella said finally. Sophie appeared in the doorway in dinosaur pajamas. She was smaller than Ryan had imagined, more real, more present than any photograph. She had his eyes, but she had Isabella's intelligence, her warmth, her careful observation of the world around her. She looked at him with the pure curiosity of a child who doesn't yet understand disappointment. Hi, Ryan said. His voice came out rough. I'm Ryan. Sophie tilted her head. Are you my daddy? This time, there was no hesitation. Yes, I am. Sophie's entire face transformed. She moved toward him slowly, testing the reality of him, reaching out one small hand to touch his arm like she needed to confirm he was solid, real, not just another drawing on the refrigerator. You came, she said simply, like she'd known he would, like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment, and Ryan realized something that changed him forever. This child had been missing him her entire life, and he'd been missing her. 2 people, separated by a lie, both aware on some level that something essential was incomplete. I came, he said. I'm here now. Stop and think about this for a second. This child has been waiting her entire life for this moment, and Ryan, the man you've been following, he's been missing it without even knowing it existed. By the time you finish watching this, you're going to see what happens when someone decides that protecting the people you love matters more than anything else. More than money, more than safety, more than fear. You're going to see a man become a father in real time, and it's going to change how you think about family. Over the next 4 days, Ryan didn't leave. He stayed in a hotel nearby and spent every waking moment with Sophie and Isabella. He read bedtime stories. He helped with breakfast. He sat on the floor and drew pictures with Sophie. Terrible pictures, by her completely honest assessment, but she praised him anyway with the generous heart of a child. He and Isabella talked about the past, about the lies, about the 6 years she'd spent working double shifts, living in fear, protecting a child that wasn't hers to protect alone. I got the letter when she was 6 months old, Isabella told him one evening after Sophie was asleep. The restraining order. It looked completely official, Ryan. Court seals, case numbers, everything. It said I couldn't contact you, couldn't let you contact her, couldn't even mention your name without legal consequences. It said if I violated it, I'd go to jail. I was terrified. What if I said something to her and she repeated it to someone? What if I violated it without meaning to? So you ran, Ryan said. I ran, Isabella confirmed. Changed my name professionally. Moved across the country. Used only my maiden name. Built a wall between us and used so thick I thought nothing could penetrate it. I thought I was protecting her. I thought you were someone dangerous, and I had to keep her safe. Ryan reached across the table and took her hand. You protected her perfectly. You protected her when I wasn't there to do it myself. But while Ryan was falling in love with his daughter and reconnecting with Isabella, Elena was uncovering something that would turn their fragile new beginning into a nightmare. Victoria Marks had discovered the investigation. She'd seen the subpoenas. She'd heard through courthouse gossip that someone was asking questions about the restraining order she'd forged. With the clarity of someone facing the end of everything, she realized she was about to be exposed. So Victoria did what cornered animals do. She attacked. She called Frank Sutton directly. She offered him money. She offered him leverage for the things she'd seen him do. She offered him a simple job: intimidate Isabella into silence. Make her understand that if she cooperated with this investigation, there would be consequences. Tell her they had ways to make people question whether she should even be raising that child. Frank was a man without many options, so he agreed. 3 days after Ryan arrived in Portland, 2 men showed up at Isabella's apartment. They had photographs. Photos of Sophie at daycare. Photos of Isabella coming home from work. Photos of the route they walked to the park. They had detailed knowledge. Where Sophie's school was. Which coffee shops they frequented. What time Sophie's classes ended. Stop the investigation, one of them said quietly. Tell your boyfriend's lawyer to back off. Because if you don't, we're going to make some calls. We're going to talk to people about your fitness as a mother. We have a lot to say. Isabella's blood turned to ice. This was the nightmare she'd been running from for 6 years. Not the legal system, not the courts, but the understanding that she was vulnerable. That her daughter was vulnerable. That the people you love can be weaponized against you. She called Ryan in tears. They're here, she said. They know about Sophie. They know where she goes to school. They know where we live. They're threatening to call social services. They're threatening to say I'm unfit. Ryan, they're threatening to take her away. The man who showed up at Isabella's apartment 4 hours later was not the man who'd been drawing pictures with Sophie. This was Ryan Kessler at full capacity. A man who'd spent 15 years building an empire by being smarter, more strategic, and more ruthless than everyone around him. This was a man who'd been shown the edge of a darkness he hadn't known existed, and who had decided that darkness would not touch his daughter. He called Marcus Chen, a man he'd known since his pre-Empire days, a man who now ran a private security firm, and had been waiting 15 years for Ryan to call in a favor. I need security at an apartment in Portland. Tonight, I need people positioned so that it's obvious this building is protected. I need it to be clear to anyone watching that if they try anything, there will be consequences. Marcus didn't ask questions. Within 2 hours, there were security specialists stationed at the building's entrance, in the parking lot, positioned strategically around the neighborhood. When Ryan held Sophie that night, her small hand in his, he made a promise that had teeth in it. Nobody is ever going to threaten you again, he said. Nobody is ever going to scare your mom again. I'm here now, and I'm not going to let anyone hurt what's mine. Sophie looked up at him with those familiar eyes and asked, Are you staying? Forever, Ryan said. And he meant it in a way that transcended biology. This child was his. Not because of DNA, though that was part of it, but because she'd claimed him, because she'd found him, because she'd asked if he was her daddy and he'd said yes, and that simple exchange had rewritten his entire life. But while Ryan was building walls of protection around Isabella and Sophie, Elena was building something else. Something more dangerous. She was building a legal case that would destroy Victoria's entire life. The forgery was obvious once you knew to look for it. The courthouse wasn't sophisticated enough to catch it, but Elena had access to resources and expertise that made her one of the best attorneys in Boston. She traced the document back to its creator. She confirmed that Victoria had created the order on her official computer, accessed it during a specific week when she was alone in the courthouse, printed it on discontinued letterhead that only she had access to. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated. This was intentional. This was a woman using her position of authority to destroy someone's life. Elena filed a formal complaint with the State Bar Association and the FBI. She contacted courthouse administration with her findings. She documented everything. Then she dug deeper and discovered the intimidation attempts, the calls to Frank Sutton, all documented. The money transfers, the explicit instructions to threaten Isabella and her daughter. What you're about to watch is what happens when someone decides that the system that failed them becomes a system they rebuild. Ryan didn't just protect his daughter. He dismantled the corruption that created this situation. And he did it for everyone else who didn't have his resources. By the end of this story, you're going to see 3 people become a real family, not despite what they've been through, because of what they've been through. And that's the difference between a story about suffering and a story about redemption. When the FBI arrived at Victoria's house, she wasn't surprised. She'd been expecting it. What she hadn't expected was how thoroughly her crimes were documented, how little she could deny. Victoria Marks was arrested on charges of forgery, abuse of authority, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and attempted extortion. Frank Sutton was arrested for threatening behavior and extortion. The courthouse immediately suspended Victoria's access and launched a full audit of her system access over the past 7 years. The story made local news, then national news. A court clerk using her position to manipulate lives. A woman who destroyed families because her own heart was broken. It was the kind of scandal that made people question the systems they trusted. 6 weeks after Victoria's arrest, Ryan made a decision. He'd spent those 6 weeks commuting between Portland and Boston, splitting himself between his company and his daughter. He'd spent those 6 weeks watching Isabella slowly relax. Watching Sophie slowly understand that he was staying. Watching both of them begin to believe in safety again. 6 weeks was enough to know what he needed to do. He called his business partner James and restructured his role at Nexus Digital. He brought in a new CEO, someone hungry, someone who wanted what he'd built. And then he focused on what actually mattered. He started looking for a house in Portland. Not big, not ostentatious. Just a house with space for a family, with a backyard where a child could run, with walls that held warmth instead of ambition. He found it on a quiet street 2 blocks from Sophie's school. Yellow door, big maple tree, hardwood floors that creaked with character. He bought it without telling Isabella or Sophie. The day they moved in, Sophie ran through the empty rooms like she was flying. She called out which one would be her bedroom. She showed Ryan where the kitchen was. She claimed the window seat in the living room as her official thinking spot. Isabella walked through the house in silence, and Ryan couldn't read her expression until she looked at him with eyes full of tears. "I don't expect anything," he said quietly. "I know we have history. I know I wasn't here. But Sophie deserves a home where she doesn't have to be afraid. And you deserve someone who actually shows up." "I spent 6 years thinking you'd hate me," Isabella said. "I built an entire story about who you were based on a lie. And the whole time you would have been here. You would have been trying to protect us." "I'm here now," Ryan said. "And I'm not leaving." That night, Isabella made dinner while Ryan helped Sophie unpack toys into a room that was finally big enough to hold them all. The house smelled like possibility, like a beginning. After Sophie fell asleep in her new bed, in her new room with a nightlight casting stars on the ceiling, Ryan and Isabella sat on the bare floor of their new living room and talked about the future. Not the past, not the lies, just what came next. "Victoria got 5 years," Isabella said. "Frank got 3 with mandatory rehabilitation. The courthouse is implementing new security protocols. 15 other cases are being reviewed." "The system actually works sometimes," Ryan said. "Because you made it work," Isabella said. "Because you had the resources and determination. But I keep thinking about all the people who don't have a Ryan Kessler with lawyers and security teams, all the people who are still running, still afraid, still alone." Ryan looked at her, and something shifted in his understanding. "Then we help them." Over the next 6 months, they set up a foundation, the Chen Kessler Foundation, dedicated to helping people who'd fallen victim to systemic corruption and abuse of authority. They hired lawyers. They worked with federal agencies. They became advocates for people who had no one else to advocate for them. Sophie's 7th birthday arrived on a sunny afternoon in spring. The house was decorated with balloons. There was a cake on the table, lopsided and imperfect, baked by Ryan from a recipe he'd found online. It wasn't beautiful, but when Sophie saw it, her entire face lit up with joy because her daddy had made it. The cake was chocolate. There were candles and singing off-key, and Isabella laughing with her head on Ryan's shoulder. A table laden with presents, books, art supplies, a new bicycle. But the most important gift came from Sophie herself. She'd drawn a picture, working on it in secret for weeks. The paper was creased from being hidden in her backpack, worn from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. It showed 4 figures. Ryan, recognizable by his familiar shape, his familiar eyes. Isabella with her dark hair and gentle face. Sophie in the middle, holding both their hands. And in the background, barely visible but definitely there, a small dog. "This is our family," Sophie said. "And this is Biscuit. I really, really want a dog, Daddy, a small one." Ryan and Isabella exchanged a glance. 3 months ago, adding anything else to their lives would have seemed impossible. But now, standing in the kitchen of their own house, looking at their daughter's art, they both knew the answer. "Then we'll get a dog," Ryan said. Biscuit will join our family. Sophie jumped up and down, and the sound of her joy was the kind of pure, uncomplicated happiness that makes the world fall away. This was what he'd missed. These moments. The sound of his daughter laughing, the warmth of Isabella beside him, the understanding, finally, of what actually mattered. Later that evening, after Sophie fell asleep, Ryan stood in her doorway and watched her sleep. The nightlight cast soft shadows across her face. Her favorite stuffed animal was clutched in her arms. On the wall beside her bed was the original drawing she'd made before Ryan showed up, the picture of a family that had been missing its father. Isabella came to stand beside him. "She was waiting for you," Isabella whispered. "Even before she knew to wait. She always knew there was supposed to be someone here. And I would have waited for her," Ryan said. "If I'd known, if I hadn't been so blind." "You're here now," Isabella said. "That's what matters, that's what she'll remember. Not the missing years, the years her daddy showed up every single day." They stood together in that doorway, watching their daughter sleep, and understood that sometimes the most important journeys start with a single question. "Are you my daddy?" 4 words that changed everything. Before you go, I want to ask you something. In the comments below, tell me, if you discovered someone had kept your child from you with a lie, would you have Ryan's patience? Or would you have burned the world down? What would you have done? Because this story isn't just about Ryan and Isabella and Sophie. It's about what we do when we discover the truth about people we trusted. Comment your answer below right now. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that families aren't about perfection, they're about showing up, then please, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. We have so many more stories to tell you. Stories about people who found their way back to each other. Stories about justice and redemption and the kind of love that lasts forever. Thank you for watching this entire story with me. That means everything. I'll see you in the next one.